I found out my boyfriend was cheating on me while I was staying at his parents' house for Thanksgiving, surrounded by his entire family, while he was upstairs taking a shower. His phone kept buzzing on the nightstand next to me, over and over again, until one message lit up the screen and completely changed everything. The message said 3 simple words: "Babe, I miss you." And in that moment, standing in a house full of people who thought I was his girlfriend, I realized something was very, very wrong. But what happened next was something he definitely never expected. Because by the end of that day, not only would his entire family know the truth about him, but he would also be sitting alone in an empty apartment with no girlfriend, no dignity, and not even a couch to sit on. If you've ever been lied to, cheated on, or made to feel like you were just another option in someone else's life, then this story is going to feel incredibly satisfying. Stories like this remind us that sometimes karma doesn't take years to arrive. Sometimes it shows up the very same day. So if you enjoy dramatic revenge stories like this one, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and get comfortable. Because this story starts with what looked like the perfect relationship and ends with one of the most satisfying acts of petty revenge you'll ever hear. About 3 years ago, I met a guy named Daniel, and for the first year of our relationship, everything about him felt almost too good to be true. We met through a group of mutual friends at a small birthday gathering. It wasn't some dramatic movie moment where we locked eyes across the room, but I did notice him right away. He had this calm confidence about him that made people naturally gravitate toward him. He wasn't loud or attention-seeking like some guys are. Instead, he was relaxed, funny, and easy to talk to. At one point during the party, we ended up standing near the kitchen counter talking about our jobs, and somehow that conversation turned into a 2-hour discussion about travel, childhood memories, and the worst bosses we had ever had. I remember laughing so much that night my face actually hurt. Before I left, he asked for my number in the most casual way possible. There was no awkward pressure or weird flirting. He just smiled and said, "I feel like we still have about 100 conversations left to finish." I thought that was cute, so I gave him my number. A few days later, he texted me asking if I wanted to grab coffee. That coffee date turned into a walk through the city, which turned into dinner, which turned into us sitting in his car outside my apartment talking for another hour because neither of us wanted the night to end. From that point on, we started seeing each other regularly. What made Daniel stand out compared to other guys I had dated was how consistent he was. He didn't disappear for days. He didn't send confusing mixed signals. If he said he was going to call, he called. If he made plans, he showed up. After years of dating people who treated relationships like a game, that consistency felt incredibly comforting. Over time, he slowly became part of my everyday life. Good morning texts turned into nightly phone calls. Weekday dinners turned into entire weekends spent together watching movies, trying new restaurants, or just walking around the city talking about random things. Daniel had this way of making you feel like you mattered. He remembered small details most people would forget. My favorite coffee order, the fact that I hated onions on my burgers, the name of my childhood dog. Sometimes he would randomly show up at my apartment with my favorite snacks or a book he thought I might like. Those small gestures made me believe he was genuinely thoughtful and emotionally invested in the relationship. About 6 months into dating, he handed me a spare key to his apartment. It wasn't some big romantic gesture either. We were just sitting on his couch watching a show, when he casually placed the key in my hand and said, "Now you don't have to wait outside if you ever get here before me." It felt like a natural step forward. Having that key made me feel like I truly belonged in his life. I started spending more nights at his place, cooking dinner together, helping him reorganize his living room, doing the normal things couples do when they start building a shared routine. Around that same time, one of my friends was moving across the country and offered me her living room and dining room furniture because she didn't want to deal with transporting it. I already had my own furniture, so instead I gave the entire set to Daniel since his apartment looked half empty. I helped him arrange everything in the living room myself. The couch went against the far wall, the coffee table in the center, and the dining table near the kitchen window. We spent almost an entire Saturday putting the space together, laughing the whole time while arguing about where things should go. When we finished, Daniel looked around the room and said, "You just upgraded my entire apartment." At the time, hearing that made me feel proud. I liked the idea that I had contributed something meaningful to his life. By the time we reached the 1-year mark in our relationship, I felt secure. For the first time in a long time, I believed I had found someone who was honest, dependable, and genuinely interested in building something real. So when Daniel invited me to spend Thanksgiving with his family, I took that invitation seriously. Meeting someone's family is always a big step. It usually means the relationship is moving into deeper territory. One evening over dinner, he mentioned it casually. "My parents keep asking when they're going to meet you," he said. I laughed and asked why they were so curious. He shrugged and replied, "Because I talk about you all the time." Hearing that made my heart swell. It made me believe that I wasn't just another girlfriend passing through his life. I thought I was someone he was proud to introduce to the people who mattered most to him. His parents lived about 2 hours away in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The plan was simple. We would drive down Wednesday evening, stay the night, have Thanksgiving dinner the next day, and then head back home on Friday morning. Nothing about the plan seemed unusual. If anything, I was excited. I even spent extra time picking out an outfit that would make a good first impression. On Wednesday afternoon, I packed a small overnight bag and met Daniel outside his apartment. The drive there felt relaxed and comfortable. We listened to music, stopped halfway for coffee, and joked about how stuffed we were going to be after Thanksgiving dinner. At one point, while we were stopped at a red light, Daniel reached over and squeezed my hand. That simple gesture made me smile. In that moment, I remember thinking that everything in my life finally felt stable. When we arrived at his parents' house later that evening, they welcomed me warmly. His mom hugged me almost immediately after we walked through the door. She was friendly and energetic, the kind of person who made you feel comfortable within minutes. His dad had a quieter personality but was equally welcoming. He shook my hand and joked that Daniel had finally brought someone home. The house itself felt cozy and inviting. The smell of food filled the air, and the kitchen counters were already covered with dishes being prepared for the next day's big meal. Dinner that night went incredibly well. We sat around the table talking and laughing while his parents asked me questions about my job, my family, and where I grew up. Daniel sat next to me the entire time, occasionally putting his arm around my shoulder or making small jokes that made everyone laugh. Watching him interact with his family made me like him even more. He seemed comfortable and relaxed around them, and they clearly cared about him. Everything about the evening reinforced the image I had built in my head of him being a trustworthy, genuine person. Later that night, when we finally went upstairs to the guest room where we were staying, I felt happy and content. I remember lying in bed thinking about how smoothly the entire visit had gone. Meeting his family had always felt like this big milestone in my mind, and the fact that everything went so well made me believe the relationship was heading toward something serious. Maybe even long-term. Maybe even permanent. I fell asleep that night feeling optimistic about the future. But the next morning, everything fell apart in the most unexpected way possible. I woke up to the sound of running water in the bathroom. Daniel was already in the shower. Sunlight was coming through the window, and the house was quiet except for the sound of water hitting the tile in the bathroom. I was just starting to wake up when I heard a buzzing sound from the nightstand next to the bed. At first, I ignored it, assuming it was just a notification. But then it buzzed again, and again, and again. Daniel's phone kept vibrating nonstop as messages and calls came through one after another. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me. I glanced over at the phone screen, expecting to see something normal like a work message or a group chat notification. Instead, what I saw made my stomach drop instantly. A message from an unsaved number had appeared on the screen, and the preview of that message said only 3 words. "Babe, I miss you." In that moment, a strange feeling spread through my chest, a mix of confusion, dread, and disbelief. My brain immediately started searching for logical explanations. Maybe it was a wrong number. Maybe it was some kind of spam message. But deep down, a quiet voice inside my head was already telling me the truth. Something was very, very wrong, and within the next few minutes, I was about to discover exactly how wrong everything was. The message on Daniel's phone stayed on the screen for only a few seconds before the screen went dark again, but those 3 words kept replaying in my mind like a broken record. "Babe, I miss you." I sat there on the edge of the bed, staring at the phone while the shower continued running in the bathroom. My heart had started beating faster, the way it does when your body senses something is wrong before your mind fully accepts it. I tried to convince myself that maybe there was a reasonable explanation. Maybe it was a coworker joking around. Maybe it was some weird spam text. But the uneasy feeling in my stomach told me otherwise. I had been with Daniel for over a year. I knew his habits, his routines, his tone when he talked about people in his life. And something about that message felt intimate in a way that made my chest tighten. The phone buzzed again, another message from the same number. This time, the preview only showed the first few words before cutting off, but it was enough to send a chill through me. It said, "Why aren't you answering?" I swallowed hard and looked toward the bathroom door. The sound of the shower was still steady, and Daniel had a habit of taking long showers, especially when he was staying at his parents' house because their water pressure was apparently better than his apartment. I knew I had at least a couple more minutes before he came out. My hands felt cold as I reached for my own phone on the nightstand. I stared at his screen for another moment, hesitating. Part of me didn't want to know. Because once you uncover the truth about something like this, there's no going back to ignorance. But the other part of me, the part that refused to be made a fool of, needed answers. So I picked up my phone and quickly typed the number that had texted him. My fingers moved almost automatically, like my body had already decided what I was going to do before my brain could stop it. I stepped quietly out of the bedroom and into the hallway so he wouldn't hear anything over the shower. Then I pressed call. For a moment, the line just rang. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was echoing in my ears. I almost hung up out of pure anxiety. But then, on the 4th ring, someone answered. "Hello?" a woman's voice said. She sounded normal, casual, like she had no idea who was calling. I hesitated for a split second, suddenly unsure how to even start the conversation, but the words came out anyway. "Hi. I'm sorry to call you like this," I said carefully, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I think you might be texting my boyfriend." There was a pause on the other end of the line. A long pause. Then she said something that made my entire world tilt sideways. "Your boyfriend?" Her voice wasn't defensive. It wasn't angry. It sounded confused. "Yes," I said slowly. Daniel Carter." Another pause followed. But this time, the silence felt heavier. When she spoke again, her tone had changed. "You're joking, right?" My stomach dropped. I leaned against the hallway wall because suddenly my legs didn't feel stable anymore. "No," I said quietly. "I've been dating him for over a year." What happened next felt like stepping into someone else's nightmare, because the woman on the phone took a deep breath and said something that made my chest go completely hollow. "I've been dating. Him for almost a year, too. For a moment, I couldn't even process the sentence. My brain refused to accept what I had just heard. It felt like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. That's not possible, I whispered automatically, even though some part of me already knew it was. But the woman continued talking, and every word she said drove the truth deeper into my chest like a knife. She told me they met at work about 11 months earlier. Daniel had told her he was single. He had pursued her persistently, asking her out multiple times until she finally agreed. They started dating shortly after that. They went to restaurants together, movies, weekend trips. She said he sometimes stayed at her apartment during the week because it was closer to his office. As she talked, a sick feeling spread through my entire body. Every sentence she said lined up perfectly with the gaps in Daniel's schedule that I had never questioned. The nights he claimed he had to work late. The weekends he said he was visiting friends. The occasional times he disappeared for a day or two with some vague explanation that I had never bothered to doubt. I felt like an idiot. But the worst part wasn't just realizing he had been lying. It was realizing how effortlessly he had maintained two completely separate relationships. At the same time, the woman on the phone sounded just as shocked as I was. "Wait, are you serious?" she asked again. "You're his girlfriend?" "Yes," I said. My voice sounded distant even to myself. "How long have you two been together?" "About a year and 2 months." Another long silence filled the call. Then she let out a soft, stunned laugh. That's around the same time he started seeing me. Hearing that confirmed everything. Daniel hadn't just made a mistake or had a one-time slip-up. This wasn't some drunken accident or brief moment of stupidity. He had deliberately started another relationship while we were already together. He had built an entire second life behind my back. The woman on the phone began telling me more details about their relationship, and each one felt like another punch to the stomach. She described dates they had gone on, things he had told her about his life, even personal stories that he had clearly recycled from conversations he had once had with me. It was like listening to someone read from a twisted script that Daniel had written for both of us. At one point, she said something that made my anger finally start to overpower the shock. "He told me he was single," she said. "He even said he hadn't been in a serious relationship for years." I clenched my jaw. That sentence flipped a switch inside me. Because in that moment, the sadness and disbelief started transforming into something else. Rage. Pure, burning rage. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was furious. Furious that he had lied so easily. Furious that he had wasted a year of my life. Furious that he had made two women believe they were special while he treated both of us like disposable options. The woman on the phone sounded just as upset as I felt. "I can't believe this," she said quietly. "I feel sick." "Yeah," I replied. "Me too." We talked for another few minutes, comparing timelines and realizing just how carefully Daniel had balanced his double life. But eventually, I heard the bathroom door open upstairs. The sound of the shower turning off meant Daniel would be coming. "Out any second. I have to go," I told her quickly. "Wait," she said. "What are you going to do?" I glanced toward the staircase leading back to the guest room, and suddenly a plan began forming in my mind. "I'm about to have breakfast with his entire family," I said slowly. There was a short pause. Then, she said, "Oh my God." "Yeah," I replied. And in that moment, something inside me shifted, because Daniel had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He had brought me into a house full of people who loved him. Without realizing, I had just learned the truth about who he really was, and I suddenly knew exactly what I was going to do. I ended the call, took a deep breath, and walked back toward the guest room. Daniel was just stepping out of the bathroom, with a towel around his waist, completely unaware that his entire secret life had just collapsed in the last 10 minutes. He smiled at me casually, "Morning," he said. And somehow, I smiled back, because the revenge had already begun. When I walked back into the guest room, Daniel was standing near the dresser drying his hair with a towel. He looked completely relaxed, like nothing in the world was wrong. Like he hadn't just spent the last year living a double life behind my back. When he saw me, he smiled casually and said, "Morning." That smile used to make me feel warm. It used to make me feel lucky. But in that moment, it made my stomach twist. Because now I knew exactly what kind of person was behind it. "Morning," I replied, forcing my voice to sound normal. Inside, my thoughts were racing. My mind was replaying everything the other woman had told me just minutes earlier. Every detail about their relationship, every lie he had told her, and every lie he had told me. But despite the chaos in my head, something strange had happened to my emotions. Instead of falling apart the way I probably would have the night before, I felt eerily calm. Like the shock had burned itself out and left behind something colder, more focused. Daniel walked over and gave me a quick kiss on the forehead. The gesture felt almost surreal now. I stood there letting it happen, thinking about how many times he might have done that same thing to the other woman. The thought made a wave of anger roll through my chest, but I kept my expression neutral. "Did you sleep okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said simply. He started getting dressed while chatting casually about breakfast. Apparently, his mom always made a huge morning meal the day after Thanksgiving. Pancakes, eggs, bacon, the whole thing. Normally, I would have been excited about that. But now every second felt like a strange performance. I was standing in the middle of his parents' house pretending everything was fine while holding the biggest secret in the room. As Daniel pulled on a shirt and grabbed his phone from the nightstand, my eyes flicked toward the screen. I wondered if he would notice the missed call from my number. But he didn't even check his notifications. He simply slipped the phone into his pocket and stretched his arms like he was starting another normal day. "Ready to face the breakfast chaos?" he joked. I nodded. "Yeah," I said, but inside I was thinking something very different. You have no idea what kind of chaos is coming. Before heading downstairs, I quietly grabbed my overnight bag and slung it over my shoulder. Daniel noticed immediately. "Why? Are you bringing your bag?" he asked. I shrugged casually. "I might head out after breakfast. I promised my sister I'd call her later and help her with something." He nodded without questioning it further. That was another thing about Daniel. He trusted the image he had built of himself so much that he never suspected anyone else might be hiding something from him. We walked downstairs together, and the smell of breakfast filled the house. His mom was already standing by the stove, flipping pancakes while his dad sat at the kitchen table reading something on his tablet. The atmosphere was warm and comfortable, exactly the kind of family morning people imagine when they think about holidays. "Good morning," his mom said cheerfully when she saw us. "Morning," Daniel replied, walking over to the counter to pour himself coffee. I forced a polite smile and greeted them as well. His dad looked up from the table and said, "Hope you two are hungry. Your mom made enough food to feed an army." Everyone laughed lightly. I sat down at the table and placed my bag next to my chair. My heart was beating faster now. Not from nerves exactly, but from anticipation, because I knew what was coming next. I knew that within the next minute or two, the calm and friendly atmosphere in that kitchen was about to completely collapse. Daniel sat down across from me and started scrolling through his phone. For a brief second, I wondered if the other woman had texted him again. If she had, he hadn't opened the messages yet. His mom placed plates of food on the table: eggs, pancakes, bacon, toast. She was smiling proudly the way parents do when they cook for their kids. Watching her move around the kitchen made me feel a brief flash of guilt. She seemed like a kind person. None of this was her fault, but the truth was the truth, and Daniel had created this situation himself. His mom set a plate in front of me and said warmly, "I hope you like pancakes." I looked at the plate for a moment, then I took a slow breath and I stood up. Everyone paused. Daniel looked confused. "What's wrong?" he asked. For a moment, the room was completely quiet. Then I spoke. "I actually won't be staying for breakfast," I said calmly. His mom blinked in surprise. "Oh, is everything okay?" I nodded slightly. "Yes," I said. "I just found out something important this morning." Daniel's expression changed instantly. A flicker of concern crossed his face, like he suddenly sensed something was off. "What do you mean?" he asked carefully. I looked directly at him, and then I said the sentence that shattered the entire room. "I found out your son has been cheating on me." The silence that followed felt almost physical. His mom froze in place. His dad slowly lowered his tablet. Daniel's face went completely pale. For a second, no one said anything at all. Then Daniel laughed nervously. "What are you talking about?" he said quickly. "That's not funny." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't get emotional. I simply looked at him and said, "The woman you've been dating for almost a year texted you this morning while you were in the shower." The color drained even further from his face. "You're crazy," he muttered. I tilted my head slightly. "Her name is Emily. You met her at work." The moment I said that, his entire body went still, because now he knew. He knew I had the truth. His. Mom looked back and forth between us in confusion. "Daniel, what is she talking about?" Daniel opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I picked up my bag from the chair beside me. "I just thought you deserved to know why I won't be coming back for any future family dinners," I said calmly. Then I looked directly at Daniel, last time. "You should probably call your other girlfriend," I added. "She's pretty upset, too." The shock on his face was almost unbelievable, but I didn't wait to hear his response. I turned around and walked toward the front door. Behind me, I could hear his mom starting to ask questions. His dad's voice sounded angry, and Daniel was trying desperately to explain something that probably didn't even make sense anymore. But I didn't stop walking, because the first part of my revenge was already complete, and Daniel still had absolutely no idea what was about to happen next. The moment I stepped outside Daniel's parents' house and closed the front door behind me, the cold morning air hit my face like a shock to my system. My hands were slightly shaking as I walked toward my car parked in the driveway. Behind me, through the door, I could still faintly hear raised voices echoing from inside the house. His mother sounded confused and upset. His father sounded angry. And Daniel sounded panicked. For a brief moment, I stood next to my car and just breathed. The entire situation felt surreal. Less than an hour earlier, I had woken up thinking I was about to have a nice holiday breakfast with my boyfriend's family. Now I was leaving that same house after exposing him as a cheater in front of the people who raised him. But strangely enough, I didn't feel the breakdown I expected. I didn't feel like crying. I didn't feel weak or defeated. Instead, I felt something much sharper. Anger. Not the chaotic kind of anger that makes you scream or throw things. This was the colder kind. The kind that settles into your chest and quietly demands justice. I got into my car, started the engine, and pulled away from the house. As the road stretched out in front of me, my thoughts kept circling the same realization, over and over again. Daniel hadn't just cheated once. He had maintained an entire second relationship for almost the entire duration of ours. That took planning. That took effort. That meant every time he told me he loved me, every time he kissed me goodnight, every time he promised he was busy with work, he had been lying directly to my face. The more I thought about it, the more furious I became. About 20 minutes into the drive home, another memory suddenly surfaced in my mind. It was something small at first, but the more I thought about it, the more significant it became. Daniel's apartment. More specifically, the furniture inside his apartment. A few months earlier, when my friend was moving out of state, she had given me her entire living room and dining room set because she didn't want to pay to transport it. I had already furnished my own apartment, so instead, I had given everything to Daniel. The couch, the coffee table, the dining table, the chairs, the side tables. We had spent an entire afternoon arranging that furniture together, turning his half-empty apartment into a comfortable living space. At the time, it felt like a thoughtful thing to do for someone I loved. But now, sitting behind the wheel while anger slowly burned through my chest, a very different thought formed in my mind. Why should he get to keep any of it? That furniture wasn't something he had bought. It wasn't something he had earned. It had been a gift from me. A gift given during a relationship that I had believed was honest and real. But now that I knew the truth, that gift no longer felt like something he deserved to enjoy. The idea hit me so suddenly that I actually laughed, out loud in my car, because the image that appeared in my head was almost too perfect. Daniel walking back into his apartment later that day, only to find it completely empty. No couch, no table, no chairs, nothing. Just an empty room echoing back the consequences of his own behavior. The more I imagined it, the more satisfying it felt. But I knew I couldn't do it alone. So I grabbed my phone and called one of my closest friends, Sarah. Sarah owned a pickup truck and was exactly the type of person who would appreciate a well-planned act of petty revenge. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, what's up?" she said casually. "Are you busy today?" I asked. There was a short pause. "That depends," she replied cautiously. "Why do you sound like you're about to commit a crime?" I took a breath. My boyfriend has been cheating on me for almost a year, I said. Another pause. Then Sarah said two words in a very serious tone. "Tell me everything." Over the next few minutes, I explained the entire situation while continuing to drive toward the city. I told her about the text message, the phone call with the other woman, the confrontation at breakfast, and how I had walked out of his parents' house just minutes earlier. By the time I finished, Sarah was completely silent for a moment. Then, she said, "Okay, first of all, he's an idiot." "Agreed," I replied. "Second," she continued, "what do you need from me?" I smiled slightly. "Do you still have that pickup truck?" I asked. "Yeah." "And are you free in about an hour?" Another pause followed. Then Sarah slowly said, "What exactly are we doing?" I looked out at the road ahead of me and pictured Daniel's living room. "We're picking up some furniture," I said. The moment she understood what I meant, Sarah burst out laughing. "Oh my God," she said. "You're serious." "Completely serious." "Give me the address," she replied immediately. By the time I reached Daniel's apartment building, Sarah's truck was already parked outside waiting for me. She stepped out of the driver's seat with a grin that told me she was fully on board with the plan. "Please tell me you still have the key," she said. I pulled it out of my pocket and held it up. "Oh, I definitely have the key." We walked into the building together, and the entire time my heart was pounding with a strange mix of adrenaline and satisfaction. It wasn't just about the furniture anymore. It was about reclaiming something, about refusing to let someone who had lied and manipulated me continue enjoying the benefits of my kindness. When we reached his apartment door, I hesitated for just a second. Then I unlocked it. The door opened to reveal the exact same living room we had spent hours decorating together months earlier. The couch sat against the wall. The coffee table rested in the center of the room. The dining table and chairs stood neatly beside the kitchen. For a moment, I just looked at it all. Then I said one simple sentence. "Let's take it." And that's exactly what we did. The moment I said, "Let's take it," Sarah immediately clapped her hands together like we were about to start the most satisfying project of the year. There was something oddly empowering about standing in that apartment knowing that just a few hours earlier I had still believed the man who lived there loved me. Now I could see the entire space differently. The couch where we had watched movies, together. The dining table where we had eaten dinner countless times. The little side tables where he used to leave his phone and keys. Every single item in that room had once felt like part of a shared life we were building together. But now, all I saw were reminders of someone who had spent the past year lying to me and another woman at the exact same time. And the more I thought about that, the more certain I became that he deserved exactly what was about to happen. Sarah grabbed one end of the dining table while I lifted the other. "I cannot believe we're actually doing this," she said, half laughing as we maneuvered the table toward the door. "Oh, we are absolutely doing this," I replied. Getting the furniture out of the apartment was surprisingly easy. The dining chairs went first. One by one, we carried them down the hallway, into the elevator, and out to the truck parked on the street. Then came the coffee table, then the side tables. Each trip felt strangely satisfying, like we were slowly erasing the comfortable life Daniel had enjoyed while secretly betraying both of us. But the real centerpiece of the room was the couch. That thing had been a nightmare to get into the apartment months earlier, and it turned out to be just as annoying to get out. Sarah and I spent nearly 10 minutes wrestling it through the doorway while laughing at how ridiculous the situation was. "Imagine his face when he gets home," Sarah said between laughs. I couldn't help smiling at that image. Daniel walking into his apartment expecting a normal evening, only to find nothing but empty walls and carpet. No couch, no table, no chairs. Just silence. Eventually, we managed to drag the couch into the elevator and load it into the truck. When we returned upstairs one last time, the apartment looked completely different. The living room was now almost entirely empty. The only things left behind were items Daniel had bought himself, a cheap TV stand and a couple random decorations on the walls. But the heart of the room was gone. The place echoed slightly when we walked across the floor. I stood in the middle of the empty living room and looked around for a moment, and strangely enough, I didn't feel angry anymore. Instead, I felt relieved, because that empty room perfectly reflected what Daniel had done to the relationship. He had hollowed it out with lies until nothing meaningful was left. "Ready?" Sarah asked. I nodded. "Yeah, I think we're done here." We closed the apartment door behind us and left the key in the mailbox where Daniel usually kept spare copies for emergencies. By the time we finished unloading the furniture at my place later that afternoon, I was physically exhausted but emotionally lighter than I had expected. The entire morning had started with shock and betrayal, but somehow, it had ended with something close to closure. Of course, Daniel did eventually try to contact me. Actually, try might be an understatement. Within an hour of us leaving the apartment, my phone started lighting up with calls and messages. At first, it was Daniel's number, then it was texts, then messages on social media. I didn't read most of them. But the few that appeared in my notifications were enough to paint a pretty clear picture of his reaction. "Where are you? Why is my apartment empty? What the hell did you do?" One message simply said, "We need to talk." I stared at that one for a moment before laughing softly. No, we really didn't. Instead of responding, I did something much simpler. I blocked him, his number, his social media, every single way he could possibly reach me. Just like that, Daniel was completely removed from my life. No arguments, No dramatic conversations, no second chances, just silence. But the story didn't quite end there. A few days later, I met up with the other woman, the one who had answered the phone that morning. Her name was Emily, just like I had mentioned during breakfast. When we first saw each other at the coffee shop, there was an awkward moment where we both kind of laughed nervously at the absurdity of the situation. "This is definitely not how I expected to make a new friend," she said. "Same," I replied. We spent almost 2 hours talking about everything Daniel had told both of us, comparing timelines, and slowly realizing just how elaborate his double life had been. But instead of feeling bitter by the end of the conversation, something unexpected happened. We both started laughing, because once the shock faded, the entire situation just felt ridiculous. One man had spent an entire year juggling 2 relationships, telling endless lies and maintaining 2 separate versions of himself, only to lose both women in the span of a single morning. And not just lose them, but also lose his living room furniture. At one point, Emily wiped tears from her eyes from laughing so hard and said, "Honestly, the furniture part might be my favorite detail." "Mine too," I admitted. By the time we finished our coffee, we had both reached the same conclusion. Daniel wasn't worth any more of our energy. He had already received exactly what he deserved, because somewhere out there, he was, sitting in a nearly empty apartment, surrounded by nothing but the consequences of his own choices. No girlfriend, no backup girlfriend, and no couch to sit on while he thought about what he had done. Looking back now, that entire experience taught me something important about relationships and self-respect. Being cheated on can make you feel powerless at first. It can make you question your judgment, your worth, even your ability to trust people again. But sometimes the best response isn't revenge fueled by rage or bitterness. Sometimes the most satisfying thing you can do is simply take back what was yours. Walk away and let the other person sit alone with the mess they created. And in Daniel's case, that mess happened to be an empty living room. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more incredible revenge stories just like this one. And I'm curious, what's the most satisfying revenge you've ever seen or experienced? Let me know in the comments below. Sometimes karma works slowly, but other times, like in this story, it shows up immediately, and when it does, it can be incredibly satisfying to watch.